After I, Wynn Jaffe, the chief forensic pathologist, submitted my request to transfer into a clerical position, everyone in the department lit up with joy and approved it unanimously. Everyone except my boyfriend's childhood friend, Yvette Hans, the rookie forensic doctor who called herself the corpse whisperer, completely broke down. She burst into my office, grabbed onto my white coat with both hands with reddened eyes. "Senior, your skills may be outdated, but I truly hope you'll stay and keep speaking up for the victims." I coldly shrugged off her hand, packed my things and walked away. In my previous life, she claimed herself as the corpse whisperer, someone who could commune with the dead, hear their murmurs, and know what happened to them before they died. I worked tirelessly on every autopsy, dissecting, analyzing, and revising my reports. She only needed a single glance at the body to recite my entire report word for word. The victims' families treated her like a saint, while they sneered at me, accusing me of disrespecting the dead. I could not accept it. I poured everything I had into every examination, but she always beat me to it, revealing the truth before I could. In the end, an extreme group of grieving family members, convinced I desecrated a corpse, kidnapped me, dismembered me, and dumped my remains in the wilderness. When I opened my eyes again, I had been reborn back to the very day Yvette first claimed she was a corpse whisperer. "Mr. Lyons, the autopsy report is ready." A colleague's voice rang in my ears. I jerked my head up and froze at the sight of several familiar faces. "Dr. Jaffe, how many pages did you write this time?" Someone mocked me with his tone dripped with contempt. I sprang to my feet with widened eyes. When I looked at the familiar autopsy room, it hit me that I had been reborn on the very day my boyfriend's childhood friend claimed to be a corpse whisperer. "Dr. Jaffe, are you okay?" One of my colleagues was startled by my reaction and asked with concern. I could not be bothered to answer her. I shoved open the autopsy room door, rushed to the desk, and grabbed the freshly printed report. The pages were filled with meticulous notes, the results of my painstaking autopsies and careful analysis. I rushed into the office, determined to report my findings before Yvette could. However, just as I opened my mouth, her voice cut through the air. "The victim exhibits dark red liver mortis, with blood-tinged froth present in the oral and nasal cavities. The cause of death is manual strangulation. The perpetrator is approximately 5 feet 7 inches, and the estimated time of death is between midnight and 1 a.m. last night." I whipped around. Yvette stood in the doorway. Her gaze was confident and unwavering. My face went pale white. The colleague beside me asked her, "How do you know that?" Yvette smiled faintly and answered bluntly, "I never had the chance to mention it before. I am actually a corpse whisperer. I can sense the spiritual world, hear the whispers of the dead, and know what they went through in life." In an instant, the world spun around me, and my vision went black. The scene was exactly the same as in my previous life. From that day onward, Yvette's identity as a corpse whisperer spread like wildfire. She became a sensation. Rumor had it, she was a messenger of the 9 nether realms, descended to the mortal world to save souls. She could coax the dead into revealing their stories without them suffering the second trauma of an autopsy. Families who had been afraid of the very idea of post-mortem examinations began treating her like a deity. What do you need a chief forensic pathologist for? She solves everything in one sentence, while you just keep tormenting the bodies. You disrespect the dead. Do you even care what will happen to you? Their shouts and curses rained on me, but I never believed in ghosts or spirits. I refused to give up. After that, I poured every ounce of skill I had into the autopsy for every case, determined to prove myself. Yet every time, Yvette always beats me to it, exposing the truth first. Eventually, families who feared autopsies saw me as a desecrator of the dead. They accused me of defiling the victims' bodies, kidnapped me, brutally dismembered me, and left my remains in the wilderness. My parents were devastated. They tried everything to bring justice and punish the culprits. However, Yvette, wielding her corpse whisperer's identity, casually lied that I had fallen off a cliff and been eaten by wild animals. My parents refused to believe it and demanded she be punished, but the other victims' families joined in persecuting them, leaving them to die in grief and injustice. Now, when I opened my eyes again, I was back on the day Yvette first claimed she was a corpse whisperer. This time, I would uncover the truth and prevent the tragedy from repeating itself. Seriously? A corpse whisperer? That sounds ridiculous. Who knows? Maybe she just made it up. My colleagues eyed Yvette suspiciously, whispering among themselves. Just then my boyfriend, Gene Lyons, took the autopsy report from my hands. After flipping through it, he nodded approvingly at her. "Yvette's right. What she said matches everything Wynn wrote." Immediately, the surrounding crowd buzzed with reactions. Some gasped while others murmured in admiration. The same people who doubted Yvette moments ago all turned strange looks toward me. Someone muttered under their breath, "Dr. Jaffe, you are always so slow. Honestly, it looks like Yvette's better than you." Exactly. She sums it up in a few sentences, while you craft entire essays. It gives me a headache just reading them. Their mocking words sent a cold shiver through me. I forced myself to stay calm. This new life had only just begun. I still had a chance to change things. I was certain of one thing. There was no way Yvette knew the autopsy conclusions in advance because of some corpse whisperer ability. She had to be getting that information some other way. Someone must have leaked the results to her. The next day, I insisted on examining the body alone and barred anyone from entering before the autopsy. Yvette stood at the doorway, looking wronged. Wynn, I don't understand. What did I do to make you treat me this way? My colleagues gave me disapproving looks when they saw this. I ignored them. After thinking it through last night, I suspected someone had been sneaking a look at my autopsy reports and feeding the information to Yvette. That was how she was able to get ahead and say the same things. Therefore, I would conduct the autopsy alone today. I wanted to see what tricks she would try this time. Once the autopsy room door shut, I finally felt able to work in peace. An hour later, I walked out with the freshly written report and presented it. However, as soon as everyone saw it, their expressions twisted strangely. A wave of unease rose in my chest. Right then Yvette spoke. Dr. Jaffe, I already went over all of this earlier. Coming over now seems unnecessary, don't you think? I stared at the group in shock. Even a few colleagues I was close to nodded in agreement. I froze on the spot, completely dumbstruck. I had done the entire autopsy alone. No one else touched the report. So how on earth did she still know everything beforehand? I replayed every detail of every autopsy, searching for the slightest clue. Then suddenly there was a flash of insight. I remembered something I had completely overlooked. Before every autopsy, Yvette always went to the morgue early and stayed for a long time. My heart skipped. Perhaps that was where I could start. That night, I swapped the body scheduled for the next day's autopsy with a different one and hid a small camera in the morgue. Sure enough, not long after work hours, Yvette appeared on the footage. She carefully examined the body, then restored everything to its original state before leaving. A thrill ran through me as I realized my plan had succeeded. The next morning, I set up for the autopsy. After what happened yesterday, I decided to perform it in front of everyone. That way, I could deliver the conclusions immediately. Yvette noticed and smiled. No solo autopsy today, Dr. Jaffe? I get it. You are afraid I will steal your thunder again, but the corpse whisperer ability is something with which I was born. Being jealous will not change that. I ignored her. All I wanted was to expose her lies. Once the team gathered, I began the autopsy and announced my findings. However, no matter what I said, she always managed to say it first every single time. A chill shot down my spine. She examined a different body yesterday. There was no way she should know any of this. So how was she still getting everything right? I stared at her, searching her confident expression for even the slightest crack. She only gave me a smile. My mind spiraled into chaos. The more I tried to make sense of it, the more anxious I became. Finally, I had no choice but to stop. Jean frowned at me. Wynn, what is wrong with you? Your efficiency is terrible. You can't even keep up with Yvette. My heart sank. I tried to explain. Still, he cut me off immediately. Enough. With your condition right now, you should take a break. Yvette's abilities speak for themselves. She'll take over the rest. My colleagues dispersed one by one, leaving me standing alone. No matter how hard I tried to think it through, I still could not understand how Yvette did it. No matter how many times I went over it, I came up empty. After that day, I was completely overshadowed by Yvette. The police bureau's attention to her grew by the day, while their attitude toward me became increasingly cold. My colleagues looked at me with nothing but disdain. It was as though I was completely unnecessary. I heard Yvette the corpse whisperer's reputation has spread to other units. That really makes the police chief look good. Exactly. And then there is that so-called chief forensic pathologist. Don't embarrass yourself here. I worked tirelessly every day to prove myself. Yet every time Yvette easily outshone me. All my efforts felt utterly wasted. Her reputation had also reached the families of the victims. Families who had previously agreed to autopsies now came to the police bureau, protested, and accused me of desecrating the bodies. If there is a corpse whisperer at the police bureau, why are you cutting into my son's body? He did not even get a whole body. What so-called expert? I say she's just a cruel, heartless villain. It was not until the chief intervened that the situation finally calmed down. Meanwhile, Yvette's fame skyrocketed. Major universities in the city invited her to give lectures. She had barely left when another horrific case occurred. This time, the victim was a female student. Her face was slashed, her head severed and impaled on a steel rod. Due to the brutal nature of the crime, the provincial authorities ordered the case to be solved as quickly as possible. During the autopsy stage, the victim's family adamantly refused to allow the examination. They protested loudly. Isn't there a corpse whisperer? Let her talk to the victim. However, Yvette was not available, so the police bureau had no choice but to painstakingly convince the family to allow the autopsy. After several hours of careful persuasion, the chief finally won them over. He reminded me, Wynn, you need to make the most of this opportunity. People outside have started judging you, but if you can crack this case, it'll be a major accomplishment, and no one will dare criticize you after that. I threw myself into the work, staying awake all night to complete the autopsy report, desperate to reclaim even a sliver of dignity. However, just as I was about to present the report to the family and my superiors, Yvette suddenly appeared. She stood in front of the crowd and said, "The estimated time of death is approximately 3 a.m. The neck shows irregular incised wounds, one edge blunt, the other sharp, with tissue bridging, consistent with a heavy, sharp-edged weapon. Multiple sharp force injuries to the face, varying in depth, indicate intense anger toward the victim. Evidence suggests the perpetrator was likely someone familiar to her. I'm sorry I'm late. If I had arrived sooner, the body could have been preserved intact." Her words hit me like a bolt from the blue, freezing me in place. A chill ran straight up my spine. Every single thing she just said was exactly what I had planned to say, word for word. The victim's parents snatched the autopsy report right out of my hand and started comparing it line by line. A moment later, their faces twisted with rage. They exploded at me. "Are you kidding me? What is the point of you hacking up bodies every day? Dr. Hans doesn't even need to look, and she already knows the results. The conclusions are the same, but you turned my daughter into pieces. She couldn't even keep her body intact. Aren't you afraid of karma? Get the hell out of here. Don't make us have to look at you." Before I could react, they lunged at me like wild animals, yanking my hair and slamming my head against the wall. If a colleague had not rushed in and stopped them, I might have been seriously hurt. Someone in the crowd, who could not stand to watch anymore, tried to calm them down. "Everyone, please take it easy. Dr. Jaffe is just trying to find the truth." Yet a furious parent cut him off instantly. "Easy. Our daughter is dead and can't even rest in peace, and you want us to calm down?" Just then, Yvette stepped forward, putting on her usual fake show of compassion. "Please everyone, don't be upset. Dr. Jaffe has always been our city's chief forensic pathologist. Her professional skills are unquestionable." She dragged out the words on purpose, shooting me a sidelong glance full of mockery. "It's just that our methods differ. I listened to the victims themselves. Hearing their voices is the greatest respect we can give them. And I, Yvette, swear to speak for every soul who can no longer speak." Her pretentious, self-righteous look made my stomach churn. I could not hold it in anymore and yelled at her. "Yvette, stop pretending you're some mystical medium. What dirty tricks did you use? How did you steal my findings?" I fixed my gaze on her, moving closer with every step. "If you really know everything, then tell us, what was in the victim's stomach?" Before I came here, I had intentionally left one detail out of the autopsy report. I wanted to see how she would react. Right then my boyfriend, Jean, shoved his way between us. His face was burning red with embarrassment. Then he slapped me across the face in front of everyone. "If you don't have the skills, then stop humiliating yourself. Get down." I held my cheek, staring at him in disbelief. He felt like a stranger. In that moment, I finally understood he definitely knew the truth. He knew what Yvette was doing, yet he chose to stand with her against me. Yvette curled her lips into a victorious smile and spoke slowly. "The victim's stomach contained cyanide. The dose was strong enough to kill her within minutes. That, in fact, was her true cause of death." I froze for a moment. My eyes widened. I could not believe what I heard. How could she possibly know that? The chief's face darkened instantly. "Wynn, look at yourself. You're bringing shame on this entire department." As all of them turned on me, their accusations crashed down like a tidal wave. I felt myself sinking into a freezing void. It was as though a thick fog was hanging over me, keeping me from seeing the key truth behind it all. Just then, a flash of clarity struck me like lightning. I finally understood. So this is the truth. I took a deep breath and looked straight at the chief. "Chief, I'm requesting a transfer to a clerical position. Effective immediately. I am done working as a forensic pathologist. I want to see how Yvette, the so-called corpse whisperer, plans to communicate with the dead if I stop performing autopsies." The archives department was located in the basement, a place that smelled of dust, mold, and forgotten injustices. It was the perfect place for a dead woman walking. When I handed in my badge and white coat, the chief looked at me with disappointment, shaking his head. "You're throwing a tantrum, Wynn. You're letting jealousy destroy your career." "Perhaps," I said coldly, packing my cardboard box. "But at least down there, I won't be disrespecting the dead, right?" Jean didn't even look at me as I left. He was too busy hovering around Yvette, who was dabbing at her dry eyes with a tissue, accepting the comforting pats of our colleagues. "I feel so guilty," Yvette whimpered, loud enough for me to hear. "I never wanted to drive Wynn away. I just wanted to help the spirits." "It's not your fault, Yvette," Jean soothed her, his hand resting possessively on her waist. Some people just can't handle being second best. I walked into the elevator and let the doors close on their faces. As the metal box descended, the noise of the precinct faded, replaced by a heavy, beautiful silence. For the first week, the precinct was peaceful. I spent my days organizing cold case files, sorting through decades of gruesome photos and dusty reports. But my mind wasn't idle. I was replaying the cyanide incident over and over. I hadn't written the cyanide finding in the report. I hadn't even spoken it aloud in the autopsy room. I had only found the almond-scented traces and the bright red discoloration of the gastric mucosa. If Yvette knew, it meant she had eyes on me. Literal eyes. I took the pen Jean had given me for our anniversary out of my pocket. It was a heavy, expensive fountain pen. I twisted the cap. Nothing. I checked my watch. Nothing. Then, I looked at the button on my scrub top, the spare set I kept in my locker. No. I sat back in the dim light of the archives. Think Wynn. Think. The answer came 3 days later, and it didn't come from a gadget. It came from habit. Every time I performed an autopsy, Jean would bring me a cup of coffee. To keep you sharp, he'd say. He would place it on the observation counter, stay for a few minutes to check in, and then leave. And Yvette? Yvette never entered the room, but the observation deck. The glass was one-way mirror. But the audio feed? It was supposed to be off unless recorded. I pulled the blueprints of the station from the archive shelves. There was a maintenance vent that ran directly from the ventilation shaft of the autopsy room to the break room next door. The same break room where Yvette spent all her time meditating before a case. It wasn't magic. It wasn't even high-tech espionage. It was acoustics. If I muttered to myself during an autopsy, which I did, a habit Jean knew well, the sound would carry. And the cyanide? I remembered now. When I found the red mucosa, I had whispered, cyanide. No. Imposible. She heard me. She had been listening through the vents like a rat in the walls. 2 weeks after my transfer, the inevitable happened. A body was pulled from the river. Bloated, decomposed, unrecognizable. A John Doe. The autopsy room remained dark. The body lay on the stainless steel table, dripping water onto the floor. Yvette stood in the hallway, surrounded by expectant detectives. Captain Miller, a man who usually despised forensics but loved quick results, looked at her expectantly. Well, Yvette? Miller asked. What's the story? Gang hit. Suicide? Yvette pressed her hand against the viewing glass, closing her eyes. She put on her theatrical performance, trembling slightly. It's cold, she whispered. So cold. Darkness. He feels heavy. He didn't want to die. He was pushed. I hear an argument about money. Murder, Miller nodded, scribbling in his notebook. Time of death. 3 days ago, Yvette said confidently. He says 3 days. They took her word for it. They launched a homicide investigation. They arrested a local loan shark who had been seen arguing with a man fitting the description 3 days prior. But the case fell apart in 48 hours. The victim walked into the station to clear his name. The body in the morgue wasn't the man the loan shark argued with. The body was a homeless veteran who had died of a heart attack and fallen into the river 5 days ago. The humiliation was palpable. Jean came down to the archives that afternoon. He looked stressed. His tie was loosened, his hair messy. Wynn, he started, his tone commanding rather than pleading. You need to come back upstairs. I didn't look up from the file I was stamping. I'm busy, Jean. These cold cases won't sort themselves. Stop playing games. Yvette she's exhausted. The spirits are overwhelming her. She needs you to handle the physical aspect so she can focus on the metaphysical. I laughed. A dry, sharp sound. The physical aspect? You mean the actual work? No thanks. I'm just a clerical worker now. I'm not qualified. Wynn. He slammed his hand on my desk. The chief is furious about the river case. We look like idiots. Then maybe you should stop relying on a woman who hallucinates instead of using science, I said, finally meeting his eyes. You wanted the corpse whisperer. You got her. Enjoy the silence. He leaned in, his voice dropping to a menace. If you don't come back and fix this, I'll make sure you're fired. Not just transferred. Blacklisted. You'll never touch a scalpel again in this country. Get out of my office, Jean, I said calmly, before I report you for harassment. He stormed out. But I knew this was just the beginning. Yvette was drowning, and she would drag everyone down with her to stay afloat. Over the next month, the precinct descended into chaos. Without my autopsies, cases were being misdiagnosed left and right. An elderly woman found dead in her bed was ruled natural causes by Yvette because she sensed peace. 2 days later, the woman's grandson was caught selling her jewelry. It was suffocation. A construction worker who fell from a scaffold was ruled an accident because Yvette heard wind. Toxicology later, much later, performed by an external lab, showed massive amounts of opioids in his system. The families were starting to turn. The same people who had praised Yvette were now gathering outside the station with signs. Justice for Marie. Science, not seances. The chief was sweating bullets. The mayor was breathing down his neck. I sat in the basement, gathering my ammunition. I wasn't just organizing files, I was building a case. I had pulled the records of every case Yvette had solved, in my previous life and this one. I found the pattern. In every case where Yvette was right, Jean had been the first officer on the scene, or had access to the preliminary evidence. In every case where she was wrong, Jean had been absent or the body had been too decomposed for visual cues. She wasn't just a fraud, she was a parrot. And Jean was her handler. But why? Why go to such lengths? I dug into Jean's financials. It took me a week to bypass his passwords. He always used his birthday, the idiot. And there it was. Transfers. Massive ones. From a private account linked to a funeral home chain. Eternal Rest Services. They were fast-tracking bodies. By using Yvette to declare causes of death instantly, they bypassed the long, expensive state autopsy process. Bodies were released to eternal rest within hours. The funeral home charged premium rates for expedited services, and they kicked back a percentage to Jean. It wasn't just ego. It was a business. They were selling closure, and the cost was the truth. I needed one final nail in the coffin. I needed to catch them in the act, publicly, undeniably. Opportunity knocked in the form of a tragedy. The mayor's daughter, Clara, was found dead in her college dorm room. She was 20 years old, a star athlete, the golden girl of the city. The pressure was nuclear. The chief called me personally. Wynn, his voice was shaking. I'm not asking. I'm begging. The mayor doesn't trust Yvette. He knows about the river case. He wants you. I'm a clerk, chief, I said, twirling a pen. I will reinstate you. Double your salary. Just please. We need to know what happened to Clara. I have conditions, I said. Name them. I do the autopsy. Alone. No Jean. No Yvette. And I want the observation room feed broadcast live to the conference room where the mayor and the press are waiting. I want total transparency. No whispers. Just science. The chief hesitated. Live? If you have nothing to hide, chief, it shouldn't be a problem. Fine. Done. I hung up and smiled. I knew Jean. He wouldn't be able to stay away. He needed to know the result before the mayor did so Yvette could swoop in and claim she knew it all along, salvaging her reputation. He would try to find a way in. The autopsy suite was prepped. I scrubbed in, the smell of antiseptic filling my lungs like oxygen. It felt like coming home. Clara lay on the table. She looked like she was sleeping, but her lips were tinged blue. I checked the vents. I had already gone in the night before and blocked the acoustic tunnel to the break room with soundproofing foam. Yvette would hear nothing. I checked the cameras. The feed was live. I began the external examination. Jean was pacing in the hallway. I could see his shadow under the door. He tried to enter, but I had locked it from the inside. A breach of protocol, but I claimed contamination risk. I worked methodically. I opened the chest cavity. I examined the heart, the lungs. I found it. A tiny, almost invisible puncture mark between her toes. And the distinct, sweet smell of insulin in the tissue breakdown. A smell most people miss, but I had trained my nose for years. An insulin overdose. It mimics natural death. A perfect murder weapon for someone smart. I leaned over the body. I knew Jean was watching the monitor in the security room, trying to read my lips, trying to see what I was writing. I decided to feed the beast. I picked up a liver sample. I held it up to the light. Then I deliberately wrote on my clipboard, in large block letters that the high-def security camera could catch if zoomed in. Ruptured aneurysm. I saw the red light on the camera blink. Jean had zoomed in. I continued the charade. I nodded to myself, looking solemn. I pretended to inspect the brain vessels, which were fine, and acted as if I found a massive bleed. I finished the autopsy. I sewed her up. I walked out of the suite and headed straight for the conference room. The conference room was packed. The mayor sat at the head of the table, looking like a man whose world had ended. The chief was sweating. Reporters lined the back wall. And there, standing by the podium, was Yvette. She looked pale but determined. Jean stood next to her, looking smug. He gave me a look that said, I win. Dr. Jaffe, the chief said. Do you have the results? Before I could speak, Yvette stepped forward, her hand raised dramatically. Wait, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Before Dr. Jaffe speaks, the spirit of Clara is here. She is screaming. The mayor looked up, eyes wide. What? She's telling me. Yvette grabbed her head as if in pain. Oh, the pressure. The pain in her head. It was sudden. Like a bolt of lightning. Jean nodded encouragingly. Yvette continued, her confidence growing. She says her head exploded. It was natural. A tragedy, but natural. An aneurysm. A vessel in her brain burst. She felt no pain, Mr. Mayor. She was gone in an instant. The room went silent. The mayor let out a sob of relief. An aneurysm? It wasn't. She wasn't hurt by anyone. No, Yvette assured him, walking over to place a hand on his shoulder. It was fate. No one is to blame. Jean smirked at me. They had taken my fake bait. They thought they had scooped me again. Is that true, Dr. Jaffe? The chief asked, looking at me. Does the autopsy confirm Dr. Hans's vision? I walked to the podium. I placed my report on the table. No, I said clearly. The room froze. Yvette's smile faltered. Excuse me. Jean snapped. Dr. Jaffe, don't let your ego get in the way of the truth. Yvette clearly read the clipboard I held up to the security camera. I interrupted, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. Or rather, you read it, Jean, and you fed it to her via the earpiece she's wearing under her hair. Yvette's hand flew to her ear. That's preposterous. Jean shouted. Is it? I turned to the mayor. Sir, I wrote aneurysm on my notes as a test. A test to see if there was a leak in this department. Because Clara didn't die of an aneurysm. I projected the photos of the brain onto the screen behind me. Her brain was perfectly healthy. No rupture. No bleed. The crowd gasped. Yvette looked like she was going to vomit. Then, how did she die? The mayor whispered, standing up. I clicked the next slide. A close-up of the toes. The tiny puncture mark. She was murdered, I said. Insulin overdose. Likely administered while she slept. It causes hypoglycemia, seizures, and death. It looks like heart failure, but the injection site tells the story. I turned to Yvette. Tell me, corpse whisperer. If you can talk to Clara, why didn't she tell you she was murdered? Why did she tell you the lie I wrote on a piece of paper? Yvette backed away, stammering. The connection, sometimes spirits are confused. Spirits aren't confused, I said, stepping closer. But frauds are. I pulled a file from my bag. I also have bank records here linking Jean Lyons to Eternal Rest Funeral Home. They've been falsifying causes of death to expedite body transfers for profit. Yvette Hans is their front, used to bypass autopsies and silence families with comforting lies. Liar. Jean lunged at me, but the chief was faster. He signaled the officers at the door. 2 uniformed cops grabbed Jean before he could reach me. Check her ear. I told the officer near Yvette. Yvette screamed as the officer brushed her hair aside and pulled out a tiny flesh-colored earpiece. The flashbulbs from the press went off like strobe lights, capturing the exact moment the corpse whisperer was revealed to be nothing more than a ventriloquist's dummy. The interrogation room was cold. I stood behind the glass, watching. Jean broke first. He always was a coward. He admitted everything in exchange for a plea deal. He admitted to the listening devices in the break room vents. He admitted to the kickbacks. But the darkest reveal came when they pressed him about the insulin. Who killed Clara? The detective asked. Jean put his head in his hands. It was a mistake. She was dating a guy, a dealer. We owed him money. He wanted us to look the other way on a shipment. We refused. He killed Clara to send a message. We had to cover it up. If it came out that a drug lord killed the mayor's daughter, the scrutiny on the department would be too high. They would look at everything. They would find the kickbacks. So you let a murderer walk free to save your funeral scam? The detective asked with disgust. We didn't kill her. Jean sobbed. No, I whispered to myself, watching him. You just killed her justice. Chapter 12. A New Beginning. Yvette's downfall was spectacular. She wasn't just fired, she was destroyed. The family she had lied to filed a class action lawsuit. She was charged with fraud, obstruction of justice, and desecration of a corpse, metaphorically. She was looking at 20 years in prison. The last time I saw her, she was being led out of the station in handcuffs. She looked at me, her eyes wild and red. I can hear them, she screamed at me. I really can. They hate you, Wynn. They hate you. I didn't flinch. Save it for the jury, Yvette. The chief offered me my job back. He offered me a promotion. I looked at the autopsy room. It was clean now. The vents were fixed. The corruption was gone. I'll take it, I said. But things are going to change around here. No more shortcuts. No more whispers. We listened to the bodies, and only the bodies. Epilogue. 3 years later, I stood in the cemetery, placing a white chrysanthemum on a grave. When Jaffe, it wasn't my grave. Not in this life. It was an empty plot I had bought, a symbolic burial for the woman who had died in the previous timeline. The woman who had been weak, who had let herself be bullied, who had been dismembered and forgotten. Dr. Jaffe? I turned. A young rookie stood there, holding a file. He looked nervous. We have a John Doe. Found in the woods. The police are stumped. They asked for the chief forensic pathologist. I smiled, buttoning my coat against the autumn chill. Let's go, I said. The dead are waiting to speak. And this time, I'm the only one listening. As we walked away, a gust of wind rustled the trees. For a second, it sounded like a whisper. But I knew better. It was just the wind. The dead don't whisper. They leave clues. And I was the best damn reader in the world.